I learned a long time ago that your conversations reveal your future. What you talk about, you think about. And what you think about, you eventually bring about. It's one of those subtle truths that shapes everything, including your wealth. I used to spend hours around people who only talked about other people. Who said what? Who did what? Who wore what? And you know what I discovered? That kind of talk kept me small. Because when your attention is on gossip, judgment, and comparison, your mind is busy building stories about others instead of building a future for yourself. Talking about people is easy. It requires no vision, no curiosity, no imagination. It's cheap conversation, and it keeps you broke, not just in money, but in spirit. Then there's the middle ground, where most people live. The middle class talk about things. The new car, the new phone, the house upgrade, the next vacation. They work hard, no doubt, but they often work to buy, not to build. Their conversations revolve around possessions, which makes their ambitions orbit consumption. They measure progress by accumulation, not transformation. Now, there's nothing wrong with enjoying the good things of life. I like fine things too. But when the talk always circles around what you can buy, it limits you to the visible. And wealth, real wealth, is created in the invisible first, in thought, in imagination, in conversation that stretches your mind. I'll tell you, the wealthy think and speak differently. Their conversations are about ideas. Ideas that solve problems, ideas that build businesses, ideas that create value for others. When I started spending time around people who talked about opportunities instead of opinions, my whole perspective changed. I remember sitting in a small living room years ago with a mentor who said, "Never walk away from a conversation poorer than when you entered it." That line hit me like lightning. From that day, I began to guard my conversations like I guarded my wallet. I realized that every talk was either a deposit or a withdrawal from my mental bank account. You can tell a wealthy thinker by the questions they ask. They don't ask, "Who's to blame?" They ask, "What can we learn?" They don't say, "I can't afford that." They ask, "How can I afford that?" They're not worried about what others are doing. They're busy designing ideas that serve, that grow, that multiply. Ideas are the seeds of wealth, and every meaningful fortune began as a simple idea nurtured in conversation. So, look around your circle. What's the tone of the talk? Are you discussing people, things, or ideas? If you want to rise financially, first rise conversationally. Change what you talk about, and you'll change what you notice. Change what you notice, and you'll change what you create. Wealth begins in the mind, and the words you speak are the first builders of that invisible fortune. When I was young and broke, I used to say things like, "I'll just try to make it to the end of the month." That was my budget. Survival. And for a long time, that's exactly what I got, just enough to survive. But one day, a mentor of mine sat me down and said something that changed my relationship with money forever. He said, "If you don't tell your money where to go, you'll always wonder where it went." That hit me hard. Because I realized I wasn't broke because I didn't make enough. I was broke because I didn't have a plan. I wasn't the master of my money. My emotions were. You see, poor people tend to operate without a budget. They think of a budget as restriction, as if planning their money means taking away their freedom. But the truth is the opposite. A budget doesn't restrict your freedom. It protects it. It's not a prison. It's a map. It tells your money what to do instead of letting your impulses make those decisions for you. Most people think wealth is about making more money. It's not. Wealth begins with managing what you already have, even if it's small. The key is control, not quantity. Now, the rich think differently. They don't just spend, they allocate. Every dollar has a destination before it's even earned. They live by strategy, not by impulse. Some of them follow simple allocation structures. 50% for essentials like living costs, 20% for investing to build assets, 20% for personal growth like education or skill development, and 10% for giving or contribution. These numbers might shift from person to person, but the principle remains the same. Every dollar must have a purpose. That's the discipline that separates a wealth builder from a wage earner. Let me tell you, when I first began allocating instead of spending, it felt strange. Because I wasn't used to directing money, I was used to reacting to it. I used to say, if there's anything left at the end of the month, I'll save. But once I flipped it, when I decided I'll save and invest first, then live on what's left, everything started to change. I began to see that wealth isn't built by chance, it's built by choice. And choices are made one allocation at a time. You must decide that your money will serve your goals, not your impulses. You must tell it where to go, toward building, not burning. Remember this, you don't need a big income to start allocating wisely. You need clarity, discipline, and consistency. You can't direct a fortune if you can't direct a paycheck. The wealthy don't let their money drift. They deploy it. They don't wait to have more. They master what they already have. That's the foundation of every empire. Precision, purpose, and a plan. When I was a young man, I thought debt was just a part of life. Everyone I knew had some. A car loan, a furniture payment, a little balance on the credit card. It felt normal until one day I realized something. Normal is broke. Most people live their whole lives buried under consumer debt, thinking it's just how the system works. They use credit to buy comfort, not capital. They borrow for pleasure, not progress. And that's the trap. The debt that takes instead of debt that gives. You see, the poor and the wealthy both use debt. The difference is in the purpose. The poor use debt for consumption, for things that lose value the moment you buy them. The wealthy use it as leverage, a tool to acquire assets that grow, appreciate, and generate income. One form of debt buys toys, the other builds empires. It's not the tool that's dangerous, it's the user's philosophy. You can use a hammer to build a house or to destroy one. The hammer doesn't decide, you do. When I was learning about business, my mentor explained leverage to me like this. Borrowing for a car that takes you to work is fine, but borrowing for a business that pays for the car, that's wisdom. That one idea shifted everything for me. Because the key is not to avoid debt completely, it's to use it intelligently. The question is not, can I afford the payment, but will this debt make me richer or poorer? Consumer debt drains your future. Leverage, when used wisely, multiplies it. Think about it. If you borrow $10,000 to buy a vacation, that money's gone and the debt remains. But if you borrow $10,000 to invest in an income-generating asset, say, a small business, or a piece of property that rents for more than the loan payment, that same $10,000 becomes a seed. It starts working for you instead of against you. Over time, those small leverage seeds can grow into forests of wealth. That's how the wealthy think. They never borrow to look rich, they borrow to become rich. Now, let's not get it twisted. Leverage requires wisdom. It's not about gambling or chasing every opportunity that promises a return. It's about understanding risk, doing your homework, and respecting the numbers. The wealthy don't borrow emotionally. They borrow strategically. They know exactly how much a dollar costs and how much it can earn. They treat leverage like fire, dangerous in careless hands, but powerful in the right ones. I learned early that if you use debt to buy liabilities, you're building a life of slavery. But if you use debt to buy assets, you're building a life of freedom. The bank can be your enemy or your partner. It depends on what side of the transaction you stand on. Every loan, every credit card, every line of credit is either pulling you down or pushing you forward. So, before you sign the next credit agreement, stop and ask, is this purchase taking money from me or bringing money to me? Because that's the real question of wealth. The poor borrow to consume, the wealthy borrow to create. One uses debt to escape the present, the other uses it to build the future. The lesson is simple. Debt is a servant, not a master. But only if you make it work for you. When I first started working, I was earning pennies compared to what I dreamed of making. And like most people, I thought the problem was the amount. I believed if I could just make more money, my life would finally change. But here's the truth I had to face. It wasn't how much I made that mattered. It was how I managed what I already had. You can hand $1 million to someone with poor money habits, and they'll be broke in a year. But give $1,000 to someone with the right philosophy, and they'll turn it into an opportunity. The secret isn't income, it's discipline. Most people live by the rule of emotional spending. They get paid, celebrate, spend, and then promise themselves they'll save whatever's left. And guess what's left? Nothing. Because lifestyle always expands to fill the income that feeds it. It's like pouring water into sand. No matter how much you add, it disappears. That's why the poor stay poor even when their paycheck grows. The pattern doesn't change. They live in a cycle of consumption, not creation. The wealthy, however, play a different game. They flip that order around. They save first and spend what's left. That single discipline, deciding that part of your income belongs to your future, not your present, is what separates the financially free from the financially trapped. Saving first is a declaration of independence. It's saying, I'm more committed to freedom than to comfort. I remember the first time I made that decision. My mentor told me, treat your savings like a bill you must pay, except this one pays you. That idea changed everything for me. I started by saving 10%, even when it hurt. And I mean really hurt. Sometimes it meant saying no to small pleasures, small luxuries. But over time, something magical happened. I didn't feel poorer. I felt stronger. Every dollar I saved represented a seed I planted in my future garden. And the garden started to grow. You see, saving first builds more than money. It builds character. It teaches patience, foresight, and self-respect. It forces you to manage what remains wisely. When you pay your future first, you become creative with what's left. You start distinguishing between needs and wants. You begin to control your money instead of letting it control you. Now, this habit doesn't depend on your income. It depends on your philosophy. If you can't save $1 out of $10, you won't save $100 out of $1,000. The habit must come first before the abundance. It's not about waiting for a better time. It's about starting where you are. If you build a habit when it's hard, you'll maintain it when it's easy. And don't just save to save to invest. Your savings are not the end goal. They are the beginning of your capital. Money sitting still loses power, but money working multiplies. When you save first, you're not depriving yourself, you're preparing yourself. You're buying the right to make choices later without desperation. So the principle is simple. Poor people save what's left after spending. The rich spend what's left after saving. One sacrifices the future for the present, the other sacrifices the present for the future. You must decide which one you'll be, because every paycheck asks you the same question. Who will get paid first, your future or your impulses? Choose wisely, because one leads to wealth and the other leads to worry. When I first began studying wealth, I was struck by how differently the rich and the poor saw the same dollar. It wasn't that the wealthy had better luck or better jobs, it was that they had better definitions. They understood something most people never stop to think about, the difference between an asset and a liability. It sounds simple, but that single distinction can determine whether you end up free or forever trapped in financial struggle. The poor and middle class buy things that look like wealth, but the wealthy buy things that build wealth. And if you get that principle deep inside your thinking, your entire financial life will change. Most people spend their lives collecting liabilities disguised as assets. They buy the new car, the bigger house, the latest gadgets, all the things that make them look successful for a moment. But here's the test I learned to apply to everything I owned. Does it put money into my pocket or take money out? If it takes money out, it's a liability, no matter how shiny or expensive it is. That new car, it starts losing value the moment you drive it off the lot. That big house with more rooms than you use, it comes with more taxes, more maintenance, more costs. Those designer clothes, they impress people who aren't paying your bills. The middle class spends to look rich, but the rich spend to become free. I remember my early years when I finally started earning more. I thought I deserved to treat myself. I bought a few things I didn't need, not because they made me money, but because they made me feel like I was making progress. But at the end of the month, I noticed something strange. My income had grown, but my stress hadn't gone away. The bills grew right alongside the paycheck. That's when it hit me. I wasn't building wealth, I was building weight. Every new liability was another stone tied to my freedom. The wealthy, on the other hand, think like gardeners. They buy seeds, not decorations. They look for assets, things that earn while they sleep. A rental property that produces income, a business that continues working without them, stocks that grow and pay dividends, skills that compound in value. These are the real treasures. They might not sparkle today, but they shine for decades. The difference is patience. The middle class buys comfort. The wealthy buy cash flow. I learned to start small, one asset at a time. Maybe it's a book that teaches you a skill, a side business you nurture after work, or a piece of real estate you buy and hold. It doesn't have to be grand. It just has to grow. Because once you experience that first stream of income that arrives without your direct effort, something inside you changes. You begin to see money as a tool, not a trophy. And here's the great secret. The discipline to buy assets over liabilities is not about greed, it's about freedom. It's the ability to choose your days, to wake up without the weight of debt or dependence. Wealth isn't the result of chance. It's the result of consistently directing your money to work for you instead of against you. Every dollar you earn asks for a job. You can let it leave to entertain you for a moment, or you can hire it to work for your future forever. So remember the rule. If it takes money out of your pocket, it's a liability. If it puts money in, it's an asset. And your wealth will grow in exact proportion to how often you choose the second over the first. When I first started in business, I thought in terms of survival, how to make it through the week, how to pay the next bill, how to keep up. I was trapped in short-term thinking, and I didn't even know it. Most people live that way. The poor think in days. They ask, how can I make it to Friday? The middle class thinks in months. How can I cover next month's bills or next year's vacation? But the wealthy, they think in decades. They ask, what can I build over the next 10, 20, or 30 years that will still be paying me long after I've stopped working? That's the difference between scarcity and abundance. It's not money, it's mindset. You see, wealth requires vision. If all you can see is today, you'll keep making decisions that trade the future for the present. You'll spend instead of invest, rest instead of build, procrastinate instead of plan. But when you begin to see 10 years down the road, everything changes. You start to ask better questions. If I invest this dollar instead of spending it, what could it become? If I spend 1 hour learning today, what will that knowledge do for me 5 years from now? The long-term thinker lives in a different world because time becomes their partner instead of their enemy. I remember when my mentor told me, don't just work for money, work for value. That hit me hard. Most people think their income is fixed by their job title or their salary bracket. But in truth, you're paid for the value you bring to the marketplace. If you want to earn more, you must become more. If you want your income to grow, your skills, your discipline, and your understanding must grow first. Money follows value, always. The poor chase money, the rich chase growth. That's why the wealthy invest heavily in themselves long before the money shows up. And here's the key, the sooner you start, the more time you give your growth and your money to compound. Compounding is one of life's quiet miracles. It doesn't just apply to finance. It applies to knowledge, habits, and discipline. Every book you read adds a layer of wisdom that connects with everything you already know. Every dollar you invest adds a layer of potential that connects with every dollar already working for you. The secret isn't to be perfect. It's to start early and stay consistent. The poor procrastinate, the rich begin. The poor say, someday I'll start. The rich say, today is day one. I learned this lesson the hard way. When I first began saving and investing, the amounts were tiny, almost laughable. But I made a commitment. I wasn't just depositing money, I was depositing a habit. And as the years passed, those little sums grew, not just in my account, but in my confidence. I realized that wealth doesn't come from sudden windfalls. It comes from quiet persistence. Most people overestimate what they can do in a week and underestimate what they can do in a decade. But if you give your effort enough time to mature, the rewards become almost inevitable. So ask yourself, are you thinking in days, months, or decades? Because your time horizon will determine your destiny. If you plan for a week, you'll survive a week. If you plan for a decade, you'll build a legacy. Don't rush the process. Build with patience and vision. Time will either be your ally or your executioner, and the choice is entirely yours. When I was young, I believed the secret to success was hard work, and for a while, I was right. Hard work builds discipline. It builds character. But at some point, I realized something startling. No matter how many hours I worked, I could never outwork time. There are only 24 hours in a day, and if your income depends entirely on those hours, you've built yourself a cage. You might decorate it nicely with a good job, a nice car, maybe even a comfortable house, but it's still a cage. The poor trade time for money. They show up, clock in, and earn just enough to survive. When they stop working, the money stops flowing. The rich think differently. They use money to buy time. They create systems that keep working even when they don't. You see, labor is important. It's where everyone starts. But labor alone will never make you free. The goal isn't just to work harder, it's to work smarter. To design your efforts in such a way that they multiply. The wealthy understand this. They build systems, not just schedules. They build assets that pay them whether they're awake or asleep. They use their time today to create something that gives them more time tomorrow. I remember early in my career, I had a few good months where the checks were flowing in. I felt great until one month things slowed down. My income dropped, but my expenses didn't. That's when it hit me. I was earning like an employee, even though I thought I was an entrepreneur. I had no systems, no leverage, just effort. And effort alone is fragile. It depends on your energy, your health, your focus, things that can fade. Wealth requires something sturdier than effort. It requires structure. So, I made a decision. I would build systems. I started creating processes in my business that didn't rely on me doing every little task. I learned to delegate, to automate, to build assets that could produce. I began investing, not just in stocks or property, but in ideas that could grow on their own. The goal was simple: to make my money and my time start working together instead of against each other. Most people use their time to earn money. The wealthy use their money to earn time. That's why, when you see a wealthy person traveling, reading, or thinking, they're not wasting time. They've earned it. They've built something that runs without them. Their money's doing the heavy lifting. And the beautiful thing is, anyone can begin this transition. It starts small, maybe by saving enough to invest, or by developing a skill that you can teach or scale. The point isn't how much you start with, but that you start. Think about this. Every time you spend money, you're trading your time. You worked hours, days, maybe weeks for that dollar. So when you spend it, ask yourself, is this purchase giving me more time or taking it away? Buy tools, assets, and knowledge that free you, not things that bind you. Here's the truth. If you only earn when you work, you'll always be chasing the clock. But if you build systems, investments, businesses, or skills that create income, you'll begin to experience the real power of wealth. Freedom isn't owning more things, it's owning more time. The poor work for money, the rich make money work for them, and when your money starts buying your time back, that's when you truly begin to live. When I first started earning a little more money, I thought I had finally made it. I remember my first big check. I celebrated, bought a nicer car, upgraded my wardrobe, even moved into a better apartment. It felt good for a while. But after a few months, something strange happened. I was back to feeling broke again. The bills had grown right alongside the income. The stress was still there, just dressed a little better. That's when I learned one of the most expensive lessons in life. If your lifestyle keeps expanding every time your income does, you'll never build wealth. The poor and middle class inflate their lifestyle with every raise. The rich set a lifestyle cap and let the surplus go to work. It's called lifestyle creep, and it's one of the silent destroyers of wealth. You get a raise, and instead of investing the difference, you upgrade your car. You earn a bonus, and you book a fancier vacation. You start making a little more, and somehow your expenses magically rise to meet your income. The truth is, it's not magic, it's habit. The habit of rewarding yourself too early. The habit of thinking comfort equals success. But comfort isn't freedom, it's just the illusion of it. I remember a conversation I had with a mentor who told me, if you can't live well on a small income, you won't live free on a large one. That hit me hard. It's not about what you earn, it's about what you keep and what you do with what you keep. Wealthy people understand that your first goal isn't to look rich, it's to become free. And freedom comes from capital, not consumption. So they set a cap, a ceiling. They decide how much of their income will fund their lifestyle, and they lock it there, even as their income rises. Imagine earning twice as much next year, but keeping your living costs the same. That difference, that extra 50%, is the seed of your fortune. That's the money you deploy into investments, assets, and opportunities. that create more income. While the average person is busy showing off their raises, the wealthy are busy multiplying theirs. This is how compounding works, not only with money, but with discipline. When you resist the urge to expand your lifestyle, you give your capital space to grow. You build cash flow that eventually starts covering your living expenses. That's when true wealth begins. When your money works harder than you do. The danger of lifestyle creep is that it makes you a slave to appearances. You start buying things to impress people who aren't thinking about you. You get trapped in the cycle of needing more to feel satisfied. But the wealthy flip the script. They measure success by how much they can save, invest, and control, not how much they can spend. They understand that every unnecessary upgrade delays financial independence. Now, I'm not saying you should never enjoy your success. Celebration is part of the journey. But make sure your celebrations don't sabotage your progress. Set boundaries for your lifestyle. Decide your cap and stick to it. As your income grows, your comfort shouldn't, your investment should. Here's a simple truth I discovered. When you raise your lifestyle, you raise your dependence. When you raise your investments, you raise your independence. One buys you things, the other buys you freedom. So the next time your income grows, resist the temptation to expand your spending. Keep your lifestyle steady and let your wealth grow in silence. Remember, financial freedom isn't about how big you live, but how wisely you build. When I was young and broke, I used to believe that wealthy people were just lucky, that somehow life handed them opportunities the rest of us never saw. But the more I learned, the clearer it became. Wealth has very little to do with luck and everything to do with how you handle risk. The middle class fears risk. The wealthy learn to manage it. The poor avoid risk entirely, and that's why they stay stuck, because growth always hides behind uncertainty. Every step toward freedom requires a little discomfort, a little courage, and a whole lot of preparation. You see, fear of risk is natural. Everyone feels it. The difference lies in what you do next. The average person stops at the feeling. They let fear dictate their decisions. The wealthy pause, study the situation, prepare a plan, and then they leap. They don't gamble, they calculate. They understand that risk isn't something to run from, it's something to work with. When I first started learning about investing, I didn't throw all my money into one venture. I studied. I learned how markets move, how businesses grow, and how to read numbers that most people ignored. I took small, manageable risks, the kind that, if I failed, would teach me a lesson but not destroy me. And every time I made a mistake, I treated it as tuition, not tragedy. The middle class often confuses safety with security. They think keeping money in a savings account is safe. They believe staying in the same job for 40 years is safe. But in truth, what's safe rarely grows. Inflation quietly eats away at savings. Time slips by while opportunities pass unnoticed. Safety without growth eventually becomes risk in disguise. The wealthy understand this. They seek calculated exposure, not blind risk, but informed risk. They invest where they can influence outcomes, in skills, businesses, relationships, and assets that multiply over time. I once knew a man who spent his life working the same job, saving faithfully, and avoiding every investment because he didn't want to lose money. When he retired, he discovered inflation had eaten half the value of his savings. He had avoided risk, but in doing so, he had invited loss. Contrast that with another man I met who started small, investing in himself first, taking courses, learning real estate, understanding taxes. He started cautiously, but acted consistently. Over the years, his knowledge turned risk into opportunity. He didn't hope to get rich. He planned to grow. And that's the real difference. Hope is not a strategy. You can't wish your way to wealth. You build it through daily habits that create predictable results. The wealthy don't hope the market goes up. They prepare for when it doesn't. They diversify, they save, they study, they adjust. They don't panic when things shift. They pivot because risk is not a threat to them, it's a tool. If you want to change your financial life, start by changing how you see risk. Stop asking, "What if I lose?" and start asking, "What if I learn?" Every successful person you admire has a trail of small failures behind them, not because they were reckless, but because they were willing. They understood that the biggest risk is doing nothing. So, don't avoid risk. Manage it. Educate yourself. Prepare wisely. Take small, smart steps forward. Because when knowledge meets courage, risk transforms into growth. And remember, you don't build wealth by waiting for the perfect moment. You build it by mastering imperfect ones.